is Chris Butcher. I'm the director of the... Oh, there, that kicked in. I'm Chris Butcher. I'm the director of the Toronto Comic Arts Festival in Toronto, Canada. I'm one of the happy, proud partners of the Lakes Festival, along with... Oh, we don't have that ident up, but graciously supported by so many wonderful people, including the British Arts Council. We are here today to interview Mr. Bryan Lee O'Malley, author of Seconds, and Snot Girl, and Winged Misa, and... Scott Pilgrim. Scott Pilgrim, that was it. That was. Yeah.
Good morning.
Good morning. Hey, hello.
I feel a little too reclined right
now. We're very relaxed up here.
We'll keep it that way.
Yeah. I was not chosen at random to interview Mr. O'Malley. I was his roommate for a number of years and friend, and we both moved to the great city of Toronto together, pretty much. Me from the suburbs of Brampton and him from the wilds of London, Ontario. There's a London, Ontario, in case you didn't know. There's not a lot going on. There wasn't much going on in Brampton either. It was a really fun, weird, very, very poor time for both of us. That got turned into a movie, so that was weird. But I want to start before we get to Scott Pilgrim. I want to actually go back to that. I want to go back to the sort of the beginning. I think one of the things that you've been really passionate about in recent years, and you've been talking a little bit about it, especially to me, but even in interviews, is about that next generation of cartoonists, the people that are coming up,
right,
and seeing how hard it was for you to have to figure everything out and rely on your friends and your peer group, and trying to mentor and trying to promote the next group of cartoonists. So I want to talk a little bit about around that. Now, just to be clear, your earliest works were things that you worked on sort of almost in a void. You were doing webcomics, you were putting them out, but you did have a peer circle that was also making comics. Can you talk a little bit about that?
I didn't, I guess.
I'm thinking of the Tofu guys in particular.
Yeah, I guess when I started out, when I was in my late teens, I was an anime fan, and I had friends in that world, and I had friends who were fan artists and things like that.
Mm-hmm.
And then we started making little mini zines and stuff, as you do. Is this too close to me?
No, you're good.
Good?
I'm booming, so I'm going to step back a little bit.
Your stentorian voice. I had friends who liked to draw, but most of them didn't. A few of them made comics.
Mm-hmm.
And then I made some friends online who were more focused on making comics, or who wanted to make comics, and then I ran away from Canada to California for 6 months in 2001, which is when I first started doing kind of anything professional. And I was just thinking about this yesterday, because this one guy brought a bunch of old comics from those days, and it was and like you were saying, some young college kid commented on my post on Instagram, saying what should I do, or how did you do that when you were 22? And it's I don't know. I mean, I knew some people online. I ran away and hung out with them for the better part of a year, and they started a comic book while I was there, and they helped me learn how to do a bunch of stuff.
Basically, you're paying rent.
I was not paying rent.
So you're paying rent through you're going to learn how to Photoshop while you're here.
Yeah, I was sleeping in half a bed, and I was just I was helping them out with their comic, and.
I wouldn't recommend that for kids today, actually, running away to California and sleeping in half a bed. The internet was a different time.
That's the thing, yeah. When young people ask me now, what I don't think that what I did can specifically help them. Maybe they can learn something, but they can't do exactly what I did, because it was the time and place.
Mm-hmm. And out of that, you made some, those guys ended up being some of the founders of Udon, who's the publisher now that does Japanese art books and manga, but also the Street Fighter comics and graphic novels as well.
Even the games, they've worked on the games.
Oh yeah, they worked on HD, and they working on. Actually, they did a bunch of stuff for Five too, all the old costumes and stuff.
Yeah.
And that's just a bunch of guys that were living in a share house basically became.
Well, and they founded this extremely popular website called Gaia Online, and like right after I moved out, and like they all kind of made a bunch of money from that too.
Yeah, if you play Gaia Online, Mal.
I mean, is it still around? I have no idea.
Yeah. They sold it off eventually, but Bryan is usually number 5 on that, and I'm usually number 7. Someone emailed me and asked me, like, offered me money for my user account because it was so low that it would be really cool, I guess, for them to have it as part of the community.
Yeah, but that was like the first online community that had like cute avatars and stuff. Like it was a good idea.
So you recommend being at the beginning of something as like a key to success?
Well, that's the thing. You never know what you're at the beginning of because you don't know what's gonna continue or what's gonna die off.
I think that's interesting too, because you were always just making the stuff you wanted to make, and you found people that were making the stuff they wanted to make, and you kind of got along. I think that that's something that is that kind of community building isn't talked about that way. It's always talked about in almost like a blagging kind of way, like find the people who are your tribe and participate in whatever. And it's like, no, when you go searching for that, I think it's a little bit weird.
No,
I think when you just do your stuff,
have friends and
put it out there and see who responds to it. How do you think things would be different if you'd been starting when there was like a Tumblr or something like that, where there was this really easy aggregation of your comics?
It is so different now, but everything's different. We could talk about how different it is all for the next hour, but
and we will.
Yeah. It's just, I feel like now it seems to me that it would be tougher to break out of the fan art kind of cycle. When everyone's around you just doing fan art, like I see so many like just people who are way more talented than me, or maybe, I guess way more skilled than me, drawing fan art, forever, and not wanting to get beyond that and to make something of their own.
I do find that, speaking as someone who directs a festival like this, I find it really frustrating to see the number of super talented people that are applying to be part of the festival that actually haven't made a comic, that have just got these beautiful, beautiful illustrations. But, I mean, my whole passion is actually comics, is telling stories in comics. And there just aren't as many outlets. The response, the feedback isn't as immediate. And you've talked a little bit about this too, where it's like you can put up a really beautiful drawing of, any popular character and get a million notes and do your own thing, and it's crickets, it's silence. And
even me, even at my level, I could still like post a new character and everyone's just like, I don't care. Like, draw Totoro again.
Yeah, but that Totoro you drew yesterday is kind of gone off the hook,
really
right?
Cute. I always just wanted to create something of my own, but that's another thing that I feel is it's harder now because with the internet, we have so much access to everything. We know how much has already been created, and it's really daunting. There's so much stuff out there, and it's so easy to live in that world that already exists and not try to push the boundaries and create your own viewpoint. But I feel like that's really important. And I didn't think anything I did would blow up and become popular around the world, but it did, and you have to try for that to happen.
So you were doing stuff with the Proto Udon, with the Studio XD guys, and then you ended up, I guess, attracting the attention of Oni Press by doing your webcomics, doing stuff there. And
that was all thanks to you.
Was that? I thought that was.
Well, you introduced me to the editor there, James, who's still my friend. Yeah.
Oh well, shit! I didn't know that. I thought you had known him already. That's great.
Well, I knew him a little bit online, but we went to the Chicago Comic-Con, Wizard World Chicago, 2001 together, and you introduced me and Locke to James.
Oh, great. Well,
you're responsible for everything in more ways than one.
Good and bad. No, but so your first published work that I think a lot of people saw, or that at least is still in print, is Hopeless Savages, and you're working with Jen Van Meter on that. Taking over the second series of the Hopeless Savages book. Now, I'm going to ask you a question I know the answer to, because I was there and I watched you agonize over drawing it. But like, what was it? I mean, you went from drawing anything you wanted to, in any format you wanted to, and putting it up online and not giving a shit, to having a schedule and a paycheck and things you had to do, and working with another writer. And
lots of deadlines to blow.
Lots of deadlines to blow. Well, tell me about that.
I guess I was pitching things to James right after I met him that fall of 2001, and I pitched him Lost at Sea at that point, but they weren't sure about my chops because I had none, and I think I inked an issue of something for them, and then they asked me to to draw the Hopeless Savages series, which was going to be, I think it was about 96 pages total. It was 4 issues, where another artist would draw at least 6 pages per issue, and I wasn't doing the covers. So it was a fairly like kind of training wheels exercise of comics, like a relatively painless way to break in and to get some experience. But no, it was very painful. It was not painless at all. Every page was like torture. Every issue was a totally different experience. The second issue, I was like flipping through it a few weeks ago for the first time in a long time, and I can see kind of like the baby version of what I do. But it was a huge struggle, and Chris was my roommate, and like it took me like the entire year to draw those 4 issues. I was so late. I didn't even ink the 3rd issue because I was so behind. Someone else had to ink it for me.
I think Christine inked
it was
that,
Christine
right?
Norrie, who was like an idol of mine at the time, and it's like it was really instructive to see her work, like her inking my work, and to see both what I liked about her inking my work and what I didn't like about it, and then I could kind of, as I got more experience, I could sort of modulate my own work and find my voice, I guess.
And you did. I mean, Lost at Sea was the most you thing, like, I think of anything you'd done to that point, like Lost at Sea was just everything you were thinking and feeling and coming out.
Right.
And, so Lost at Sea was published as an original graphic novel by Oni. That was one of their very first ones, too. Before that, they had done everything in issues and then collected it.
It was to be issues at first, and then it became a graphic novel. But yeah, I had been doing like short stories online before that. Like I think starting around 2000, summer 2000, I remember I did a story, like I just drew it in Sharpie like in 24 hours basically. And it was very mundane, and it was like, that was kind of me trying to break out of the fan world. And also when I was in high school, I was always making up these huge epic storylines. And never getting past like page 10 of drawing them, or page 1 really. So starting to do these short things and these kind of like more reality-based things broke me out of that, I think. It got me thinking more naturalistically and not thinking about my work in terms of other work, but more in terms of life, like trying to present something that I knew, which I didn't know much. I lived in a tiny town and I just didn't do anything. I had no experience.
No life experience.
But like, most people don't at that age.
Sure. So I think that's really interesting too, because the thing that I'd drawn at that point that was the longest was just like a 20-page story about me and my friends hanging out. Yeah. Whereas my epic fantasy adventure series, which I'd done thousands of pin-ups drawings of all the characters and designs and modeling it after the Studio Ghibli art of books and all that kind of stuff, like I think I did like 6 pages in the end.
Yeah.
And that idea of tackling something that has like a finite amount of spaces, something that I think artists have to come to, because there's a lot of artists I see that have these grand, huge plans, and it's just not realistic for that to be your first thing. I mean, you're going to grow and change so much while you're doing that.
Yeah, that's the thing that you don't anticipate, is that just that your own growth. Because when you come up with ideas, it's very exciting. It's very exciting to just sit there and be like, oh my god, this is a great idea. This is what's going to happen in like chapter 52 of my epic series. And you're just never going to get there. So you have to start at the start. And then Lost at Sea was like the direct result of those like short stories. I think it was more natural, and it was set in nominally the real world, and it had magical elements, but it was, and it's still like rough. Like it was really tough to finish that book. Like I did totally evolve over the course of it, and
at the time I couldn't see it. You could see like these changes that had happened in your art. That I couldn't see, and I was giving you shit about it. Pardon my French.
Well, it was more just I felt inconsistent, because from day to day I was using a different pen to do this and that or whatever, and I just.
You changed paper sizes halfway through too, didn't you?
Maybe.
On that one? Yeah.
Probably.
But there's like, if you get the Lost at Sea hardcover, the anniversary edition that came out, there's some color strips in the back that have always been sort of my favorite thing that you did with those characters. But even now, looking at it and seeing what those strips looked like, which were done before the series, and then the series itself, like how much your art grew in, like, we're talking under a year, just from drawing pages, your art changes so much. That's a really big deal.
Yeah, and then looking back, Scott Pilgrim Volume 1 came out 8 months after Lost at Sea came out, which is like, when did I write and draw that? I don't know. I think I finished most of that book in a 3-month period, which is inconceivable.
You
I
did.
can't even write a single sentence in a 3-month period.
A lot of sentence fragments on the Instagram these days.
But yeah, no. So Lost at Sea, yeah, it took at least a year. I remember starting it in January 2003, and it came out in December, which was it was late. No one cares now, but it was late.
Yeah.
Most of my books have been late.
Oh, hope you're enjoying Snot Girl. It's gonna be late. So yeah, Scott Pilgrim. That was. I guess Lost at Sea did well enough that Oni was just like, yeah, go for it. Like, let's see what happens.
It didn't do that well, but I pitched. They liked the idea. They liked the pitch. I don't know if you guys have read Blue Monday, but Blue Monday was Oni's biggest series at the time, I think, and it was just kind of a Archie-ish series, but set in the late 80s, early 90s, and it was very hip, and like it was about music, and it was super cool, and I loved it so much, by China Cluxton, and I just told them, I was like, oh, I want to do basically Blue Monday meets Dragon Ball, and they were like, okay, that was it. That was like one sentence pitch, and obviously I did the book really fast, and they published it really fast, and it got less pre-orders than Lost at Sea did, so I figured my career was just spiraling, nose diving into the toilet, and I just went for it, you know. I was thinking about this the other day, actually. I think it was a quote from Urasawa about how his whole career is just like a trick, and that's how I felt about Scott Pilgrim. I was like, I'm just going to do this book it's a whole graphic novel. This is like the first one I ever conceived as just a whole book, and I can make it 100 pages that's completely naturalistic, slice of life, and then the last 40 pages is just going to be like insane video game battles and whatever Bollywood musical. So that's what I did, and people received it that way at first because it was kind of
the early reviews on Scott Pilgrim. I know it's now like it was, especially when the movie came out.
Now you can see it, but
it was really pitched as this like epic video game thing. But when it came out, especially on the heels of Lost at Sea, which was kind of dour.
It was in early 2000s, and it was kind of like this time when everything was a little more like mumblecore, slice of life and natural, and then I just threw in this other element at the end that really threw people. But by the time like book 2 and 3 came out, like people started to kind of roll with it. But yeah, at first there was some resistance to the idea that it was going to be as stupid as
this
it was.
Romance story, and all of a sudden they started fighting. What was that about? It's like, no, that's the actual book. You were tricked for the first 100 pages, which I think is great. I think more artists need to do that. You need to but it's really tough now to A, keep that kind of secret, and B, challenge audience expectations. They want the thing that they want to going in,
And these days they want to read the synopsis before they even start page 1, or they want to read the whole Wikipedia about the book before they even buy the book.
Yeah, that can be tough.
And it's a little different these days.
So I'm going to ask a question or two more. We're going to be in Scott Pilgrim for a little bit. So if you have a question, just think about it and raise your hand. Please make sure it's a legitimate question with like an answer that you expect, as opposed to, hey, you're great.
We'll shout you down.
Yeah, we will have to.
With
I'm
love.
sorry. With love. I might ask for the house lights to come up a little bit too, just so I can see the audience. But all right, so Scott Pilgrim does not start terribly strong in terms of sales, but it did pick up. It did pick up with Volume 2 and Volume 3. And really, I think Volume 3 especially became something, because it sort of ended the first half of the series, was really something that caught, like by that point, it was a real going concern, is what I want to say.
It was starting to become sort of for comics, like a cult underground kind of thing. Like people were getting into, but it got like mentioned in a few mainstream magazines and things that year. Like Entertainment Weekly, I think, had it, Volume 3 as a pick of the month or something like that. And yeah, it was the first time my work had gotten that kind of attention. It still wasn't selling.
No.
But people were starting to be aware of it.
It was not. It was selling more. That first one.
Yeah. The first one made me $0 at first.
Yeah.
Negative dollars. Right?
It paid out in the long run, so kids, think about that.
I still get checks for Lost at Sea, obviously, which is crazy.
Okay.
I never thought I'd make a dime on that book.
Oh, that's nice. Keep your work in print too. Own your work as well.
Yeah, that's true.
But right around then is when the movie got optioned, or like right around the third volume, right?
And I think it was during the second, right off the first, really. But there was already a screenplay by the time the third one was out, I think.
I remember reading that at your house, actually.
Yeah.
But you had moved away from Toronto too. How did that affect writing the book? Not being in Toronto and writing this super Toronto-y series. You'd moved to Halifax and then to North Carolina.
Yeah, I think it was good. I think it gave me perspective because because it's, I don't know, it became like a story about like those like 2 years of our lives basically, but I had 10 years or 7 years to think about it, which probably helped. I know the third book was very rainy because I moved to Nova Scotia where it rains all the time, so I just made it very rainy, which I think helped with the atmosphere. And I don't know. I haven't lived in Toronto since 2005.
Oh right.
So that was my era, and then Toronto was always kind of frozen in time for me. So it became like Scott Pilgrim world in my head, and that's kind of what Toronto is to all these readers, I'm sure.
Well, the movie, and then the movie was set a little bit further afield too, and now we have Drake, so that's pretty good.
Well, Drake fixed everything. So
thanks, Drake. I am curious though, because you mentioned that Toronto for you is frozen in a very specific time and place. Although obviously you've come back and visited quite a few times, but are the characters frozen in a certain place and time? Because I mean, it's kind of based on a certain time in our lives, right? Where these characters roughly represent things that we went through. Does that mean that they've continued to grow in exactly the way, like is Scott you, like 10 years later, or is Scott gone off in a different direction? Has Ramona gone off in a direction, like, and what's going on with Wallace is what I'd like to know.
I don't think about them that way, I guess. If I had to, I probably could come up with like, I feel like I probably still know the characters somewhere in my heart. But I've never been very like methodical about characters, so I just kind of, I understand them in some vague way, and I know what they're going to do, and I don't.
But
know
until you're called upon to maybe put that into a graphic novel.
Yeah, I would be very reluctant to say like, what's Scott Pilgrim doing at age 35? Like, it would be depressing.
But you're a big fan of J.K. Rowling, and she did that at the end
great job
of Harry Potter 7
well,
and the new books.
I didn't like the end of Harry Potter 7, but the play is great. I just saw it this past week, and it was it's really well done.
So you actually like finding out what Harry Potter's up to at 35?
Yeah, and that's a great model for if you want to do a follow-up set 20 years later. That's like, it was wonderful.
Oh, that's good. So I am willing and able to take a question from the audience. If you have something that's pressing that you'd like, just pop up your hand. I can only see one person. You there?
Yeah. I've got to say, with the Scott Pilgrim film, I love the direction of the actors, but if you were to choose director and actors for Seconds, who would you choose?
Oh, I have no idea. I don't really think about them that way, because my characters are just they're such a nebulous thing. I hate to like pin them down in my mind. And when it happened with Scott Pilgrim, like the voice definitely changed a bit, and it was tough to stick to my original kind of nebulous ideas once I heard the voice of Michael Cera or Mark. What's Mark's last name? The Stephen Stills. Anyway.
Oh yeah.
The voices, yeah, some of them like just nailed it like right away. Like even I saw like the audition tapes and stuff, and it just that changed my ideas about the characters immediately. So I would prefer to just keep them in my head until the moment.
And let someone else choose who's going to be.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And as far as like direction, yeah, I don't know. Seconds is I don't know what I mean.
Seconds would be a very different movie.
It would be a very different movie.
Yeah.
So I don't know. I don't know. I don't like to think about it that much because I don't make movies. So if it was to be a movie, I would just like it to be someone's vision, the same way it was Edgar's vision for Scott Pilgrim.
Was it difficult then seeing the movie? I mean, the movie, there was a script right around when Volume 2, Volume 3 was coming out of the books.
The first script was not great.
And then, well,
but that's what happens. That's how it works.
But then as you were doing more books, like I think the movie really you'd only had Volume 4 mapped out and had to like sketch out Volume 5 and 6 pretty quick. Is that accurate?
Yeah, basically the first draft was done after Volume 3, and it was rough. And then after Volume 4, there was a writer's strike somewhere in between there. It was in 2007, I think. And once either right before the strike or right after the strike, they got Volume 4, and they were really kind of re-inspired. Because I think Volume 4 is maybe like the strongest of the volumes, or the most like compellingly dramatic-y kind of. I don't know. It's more movie-like, I guess, in its storytelling, and they really liked that, and then that kind of became the structure of the movie for them a little bit. Although they were still mostly using Volume 1, 2, and 3 as like their source material. So the draft they did after Volume 4 was basically what we see, and then I was writing the script for Volume 5, which ended up being totally changed later, but they used a lot of the script for Volume 5, which had the Toronto Battle of the Bands and things like that, and I just didn't end up drawing it because it was way too hard to draw. And I was like, oh, you can just cast like 500 extras and I don't have to draw them? Like, never mind, you can do that, I'll do something else.
And you ended up with the robot battle.
Yeah, so I did the robot stuff
robot
instead,
battle.
yeah. Because robots are more fun to draw than 500 people in an indie band crowd.
Fair. I think it's, and then Volume 6 was tonally really, really different than the movie. The major story beats are kind of there, I think, but the tone of Volume 6, the sort of abandoning the plot basically to run away and then come back to it again, and then the tiny
but I always go back to Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles, where they go for like a wilderness sabbatical before they come back and fight Shredder.
Oh, okay, yeah.
That's my model for everything.
The Eastman and Laird Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles is your...
Well, the movie, the first movie, like...
Oh, right,
It came out when I was like 12, and that's like, it's burned into my brain, so I'll never forget.
That's really closely modeled on the first like 19 issues of the Turtles comics.
Yeah, I know.
Yeah, it's...
Which I have read, like they put out a big hardcover a few years ago.
Oh, yeah.
Which is, it's lovely. I never had that stuff when I was a kid because it was really hard to find.
I was just thinking that Steven at page 45 is going to be so angry that we're like hardcore recommending the Turtles comics. And the one thing he didn't think to bring in the page 45 room is Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles. That's great.
Yeah.
So yeah, we got a second question. I can't see anybody. Sorry. Can you guys put your hands up again? Oh, in the front row. Yeah.
When you're inking your work, what materials do you use?
I mean, it varies. I guess you weren't here for the drawing yesterday, but yesterday I didn't bring any of my stuff. I literally just grabbed whatever was lying in front of me, and it turned out all right. So, but usually I use a brush and ink, which is what I learned from Jeff Smith of Bone. I think he must have had like a letters column or something. Because when you're young, like that's what you obsess over. Like what paper and pens and tools and ink do you use? Like, and it is good to know. He always said Winsor & Newton Series 7 brush, size 1, which is a very small, tiny little brush, and I could never handle that. Like, it's so, I can't even hold it in my hand. Like, my hand doesn't go that small. So I usually use like a 3 or 4, which is a lot bigger.
I remember talking to you one time when you were gonna like, so late, I'm going to switch from a 3 to a 4 because I'll be able to put more ink down quicker because it's a bigger brush.
Yeah, and then in Scott Pilgrim, I kept changing from book to book, and I also changed the paper size. The first 3 books were drawn like about this size. I don't know what the European size standards are, but
it's roughly A4. Yeah, it was like 8.5 by 11. Yeah.
And then in the 4th and 5th, I moved up to a much bigger size, which is why the art looks better. I think. But yeah, I was just using brushes basically, and then whatever little pens I could find to fill in details. And I didn't use much digital stuff until after Scott Pilgrim, really.
Well, Volume 6, you were penciling digitally, right?
No.
Oh no?
Seconds, I did that.
Oh, okay.
No, I didn't get a tab. Whatever those Cintiq, I didn't get a Cintiq until after Scott Pilgrim because they were really expensive.
They are very expensive.
And same with tools, like these brushes. I don't know if they even sell Winsor & Newton in Europe, but like those brushes are so expensive. Like they were like $40 each. Like I couldn't afford that at the time, so I would just get the cheapest brushes I could find that would still do something.
Yeah, it's interesting to me all the stuff that came up around Scott Pilgrim because it was just like your book, and then all of a sudden I could download it from my PlayStation 3 as a video game, or all the sort of like toys and stuff like that around it was really interesting to me. But I always thought, with a few small exceptions, that the video game was kind of a more faithful adaptation of like your intention for the comic than the movie was. Like the video game could be its own, could be closer without
because the
sacrificing.
comic was basically a video game in comic form, just with more dialogue, and then we made the game basically on that principle that it was going to be a video game of the comic, but with less dialogue, with almost no dialogue.
Yeah.
And I basically wrote all the dialogue, of which there's very little. So I worked on it very, very closely.
I really like that game. It's a lot of fun.
It was a lot of fun. I know it got taken away from the store a few years ago, and I'm really trying to bring it back somehow. But it's very complex because there's two huge companies that both own a piece of it, and both don't want anyone else to have a piece of it, but also don't care that much because it doesn't make them that much money.
Yeah.
So yeah, it's just one of those things that I just have to convince the right people, and then eventually it'll show up again.
Here's hoping.
Yeah.
All right, questions? Yeah, in the front row.
Do you have like a favourite scene or favourite part that really stands out in your mind from Scott Pilgrim?
From the books?
Yeah.
Well, we watched the movie last night, so I have it in my head now. I like the parts of the movie that come directly from the books. One of my favorite bits in the movie is Todd Ingram saying like the whole "she dusts" that whole bit. I love that bit because it's one of my favorite pages of the comic too. The entire back and forth is like one page of the comic, and I just like, where did I come up with that? But it's really funny when he says it. Same with the bread makes you fat in the movie. It always makes me laugh. In the comics, I don't know. The comics are all right. I was flipping through one of them the other day. Which one? 2? I think it was 2. I'm always just randomly flipping through because I'm working on new stuff, and I'm like, how did I used to do this? Because it's so hard. It was always hard, but like at some point, you do something. Something gets down on the page, and it comes out, and it's fine.
Yeah.
I don't know. Overall, I like Volume 4 the best, I think. I like the drawings in Volume 5 the best. Volume 6 feels a little odd to me just because I worked with assistants, and it was kind of rushed. Like,
Volume 6 looks a lot more like the video game, like that. The characters all get a little bit wider, I feel like.
Yeah. My style kind of evolved that way. And Seconds is kind of that way too, more like chibi, round-headed people. But yeah, I don't know, as far as favorite scenes, yeah, I think those bits, I like most of the Kim Pine bits in the comics. The part in Volume 5 where the big emotional moment in Volume 5 when Kim gets a fake text from Ramona, I thought that was good.
That's a good one. We'll do one more Scott Pilgrim question. We're going to go on to Seconds. So who's specifically Scott Pilgrim? You had your hand up for a little bit, right?
Was there ever a plan, because you sold the movie rights to it so early on, to make it into 2 or a series of separate films or shows? Because all the battles and stuff are quite closely packed in together in one film.
Yeah, well, it was always up to Edgar as far as I was concerned. So it's whatever he wanted to do, whatever we could convince the studio to do. And honestly, like the fact that it exists in any form, the more years that pass, like I realized like what a miracle it is that it got made at all. Because movies like that don't get made, and especially didn't get made at the time. Like I think it pushed some boundaries.
In terms of kind of integrating visual effects, especially.
Yeah, and even just in like kind of geek culture terms, like it was kind of the geekiest thing I had ever seen on the screen at the time. Good and bad.
And you think about who's in that movie. That was the thing that really got you yesterday. That like Chris Evans, Captain America, is in that movie.
Yeah, he had already been in the Fantastic Four movies, which I've never seen.
But like that tanked, so you could get him for could get him for Scott. And like Brandon Routh, who was Superman, and Brie Larson, and
the big stars are still around, and then the people, like I don't think Parks and Rec had started. I didn't know who Aubrey Plaza was, and I didn't know who Mary Elizabeth Winstead was, and she's still like. Did you anyone see 10 Cloverfield Lane? That movie was brilliant. Yeah, she's doing great stuff.
So the idea of having that big ensemble, though, like something like you get like with Avengers now, had never happened before Scott Pilgrim, where you would have all these, like so many different characters that all got their moments.
And it was all on the strength of Edgar. Like everyone, all those funny, amazing, talented people like wanted to work with Edgar. And yeah, he's a master of casting.
Yeah, he did. Sorry.
Good fella. Yeah, in terms of sequels and stuff, there was never really on the table. It was really like, how many ex-boyfriends will we fit into this movie? Like, and will we change the story to be about 5 or whatever? But 7 is just such a good number.
Yeah.
I don't think you could get rid of that. And then he really was set on being faithful to the comic. which is something that was not done in the 2000s. And now it's kind of like a matter of fact. Like everyone does that. Books, movies, or books and comics. Like the adaptations are much more faithful now.
So that brings us to Seconds, which is for me really interesting. I was a little bit worried about you with this one.
You've always been worried about me, though.
Well, yeah.
You're like my mother.
But this one, you had intended to be the longest work you were going to do. It was a single work, and you had thought of it as like a big graphic novel from the get-go. And I remember all the way back, I will let everyone in on a secret, Scott Pilgrim 2 was going to be like 350 or 400 pages at one point. You were going to do like an epic Dragon Ball, like full volume battle tacked on to the end of Scott Pilgrim 2.
That.
Yeah. Remember, the corridors that run through the city with like the power lines on them up near where we used to live?
Yeah.
Yeah, you had a whole plan mapped out in one of your sketchbooks about how there was going to be this huge ongoing battle between Scott and Ives' dad. That just ended up being the like sort of cool subway stuff that got pushed a little bit back into the series. Yeah. And you were just like, oh no, it's actually crazy to try and figure out a 400-page fight scene. Like, I'm not going to do that. And then saying, yeah, okay, I've finished Scott Pilgrim. Let's do a 350-page graphic novel. I was a little worried.
Well, I felt like I was I didn't want to be pigeonholed as just action and just comedy, and just like I wanted to do something that was a little more intentionally literary, and I feel like Seconds is still really stupid at its core. Like it's got the stupidity that I like, but yeah, it has a little slightly loftier goals maybe, and I don't know how well it does at hitting those goals, but I think it was pretty good. I still like looking at it. It's a nice little book. I like the shape of it. It's always things like that. It's like things that other people don't really care about. That's what I'm proudest of. Like, oh, the shape of it, the color of it. It's nice. It's a nice red.
It's a nice red and blue
Good
playing
choice
off
of
each other.
colors,
Yeah. That's good. And I guess I liked it, but I wasn't sure. Like reading it, I was just like, that is not Scott Pilgrim. It was my first thought. Like
Right.
It's really it is a different book.
Yeah. Well, that was what I always said about Scott Pilgrim, was that I was putting in everything nerdy in my head. I put it into Scott Pilgrim and try to get it out of my head. Like, so it's like it's on paper now. I don't have to think about it anymore. And then it was all gone. I was like, wait, now what? So all the only other thing I had was that I used to work in a restaurant during the first 2 Scott Pilgrims, and that was always like I really liked the restaurant where I worked. I didn't like eating there. It wasn't the greatest food, but the kitchen and everything was very nice. It was very cool. It was very like aesthetically interesting. It was an old for Toronto building, like kind of I don't know when it, like turn of the century kind of building. And it was the basement was much like Seconds. The basement of Seconds is modeled on the restaurant where I used to work. The checkerboard floors and kind of like the Warren-like corridors. And I just wanted to put that into a story at some point. Originally, I wanted to do Seconds like after volume 3 or 4, because I was sick of Scott Pilgrim for a little bit before the movie came out, and eventually I just realized, like you said about doing a super long Scott Pilgrim, like I wanted to power through and then finish the story and like finish something, which was what I set out to do with Scott Pilgrim. I set out to do 6 volumes and to do this big series and to commit to something of that scope. So I really realized I had to just get through it, and then I could stockpile ideas for Seconds at the same time. So that's what I did, and I wrote Seconds. What it seems quick now, because what I'm writing now has been taking much longer. I wrote it in about 6 or 8 months, and then drawing it took a long time because I injured myself halfway through, which was bad, but which happens to a lot of cartoonists. So if you plan to be a cartoonist, be very careful to pay attention to your fitness. Shoulders and arms and necks, and backs, they're all connected apparently. So you can't just pay attention to your hand, it's the whole body actually. So so during Seconds, about halfway through Seconds, I was actually working out, I think, when I injured myself, so that doesn't, I don't know, don't work out, as far as I'm concerned. And yeah, it took me 6 months to be able to draw, which was terrible. It was a dark time.
Yeah, it was. Leave that there. So, have we got any other questions? Anything about seconds or anything like that? Yeah, in the front.
Do you draw a character and then find out who they are, or do you write a character and then see what they look like?
Oh, that's a great question.
I mean, I think it's a bit of both. It depends on the character. With Seconds, I think I had a visual for the two main characters, for Katie and Hazel. I remember drawing them about 2006, which is way before the book came out. So I think I knew them. But then Liz, the kind of like the spirit girl, she took a longer time to figure out. I did a lot of different variations on her. And then some of the other minor characters, there's a character named Yana who only appears in like 4 panels in the entire book, but I drew more sketches of her than I drew her in the actual book, I think, because she kept changing. I didn't know what the vibe was. And then, the new book I've been working on, like I've been drawing this character just over and over and over and over, and I knew what she looked like vaguely, but I want to like imbue that outline with life. So I've just been kind of trying to do that for the past year.
People really respond to, I was going back through your Instagram, and you have 2 very adorable dogs, and people like the dogs, but the drawings that you draw, non-Totoro Scott Pilgrim drawings even, of that lead character from the new book with the white hair, are like your most liked, like 7,000, 8,000, 9,000 likes on these Instagram photos. People are really responding to this. Does that make it easier or harder for you to create the character that goes along or to tell her story?
Well, I think I've cultivated that character like over the past year, and at first I also cultivated my dogs on Instagram. At first it was like, why are you posting pictures of your dogs? Like, post more Scott Pilgrim drawings. But I made it so that I get 2,000 likes on pictures of my dogs. That was hard work. And same with the new character. Her name's Aubrey. I'm getting better at drawing her, which people respond to. Good drawings, it turns out. I'm getting better at making her feel like a person, or feel like there's life in her eyes. So I think people respond to that too, and hopefully they'll respond to the book if I can figure out what she's going to do in the book. Drawing is easier at this point than writing.
Really?
I don't know why. I feel like the older I get, I feel like I get paralyzed by how much good writing is out there, and like, do I even need to add to that pile? I don't know. Sometimes, some days I'm like, is what I have to say like worth a damn? So that those days I just sit down and draw more.
That's interesting.
It's easier when you're young, I think, because you're just like, yeah, people want to hear what I have to say.
I'm important.
I'm important. I know 5 people, and they all really care.
That's one of the things about Scott Pilgrim, and even about Seconds, because I think Seconds reflects a point, different time in your life as well, is that you write you're writing books about these scenes, like, that you're a part of, and you're kind of immortalizing this like time and place in this scene and these friend groups. And then when you have something like Scott Pilgrim, especially watching it again last night, like, it is insane to like rocket you and your mates up to be like literal movie stars. Like, that's a really weird thing that not a lot of people get to do.
Well, we were talking about this last night, but it was very weird for us to watch the Scott Pilgrim movie.
Yeah.
And I feel like last night is the first time both of us were able to kind of step back and see it for what it is.
Yeah.
Because it's really just a movie of our lives, which is disturbing. It's disturbing because we didn't make it.
No.
It's not our movie. And even, when it acquires a huge cult fan base, like, it becomes even less our movie. It's their movie. But it's about us in a really weird way.
I remember Edgar telling me that Kieran Culkin, who played Wallace Wells, he's like, oh yeah, he's just like you. And I'm like, that's threatening. That's like a threatening thing to say. And it was meant as a compliment, like, don't worry, it's going to be great. He's doing a good job. No, it's like very Invasion of the Body Snatchers, actually. It was great.
The scene, which scene in the movie felt most to you like yourself?
Guess Who's Drunk?
Guess Who's Drunk? Yeah.
But that happened. Like, that's the other thing. That scene actually happened. I actually came in and was just like, guess who's drunk? And fell on your bed. And that was really,
And,
you
like,
were not
multiple
okay.
times.
You were
No, that
really.
that was what you did.
Yeah.
My bed was closer than to the door than your bed.
Well, my
I
bed
think.
was a sofa, but I didn't even make it up most days. That was very.
yeah.
Yeah.
Your room was further down the hall. So
Yeah.
it's like, yeah, you took up a lot of my bed. Let me
Yeah.
tell you.
It was, but yeah, that was like when you wrote that, and I think, yeah, that whole sequence of like, you know, telling people, yeah, this is a real person, this is a real person. Well, sorry, legally none of it's real. But yeah, I think that's something that not a lot of people get to do, and I think that it is absolutely weird, but it's neat. It's neat to be able to like show that to people. It's neat to be able to have. While you were making Scott Pilgrim, I met my husband, and he's awesome. But he was sad he wasn't in the movie, but then happy he was in the video game. Like, and it's just like, oh, I wasn't in the movie. Oh, but I'm in the video game. Like, that's not something people do. Like, they don't get to have that option. And that's just like an opinion he has. And I think that's completely insane. You know what I mean? And I think reconciling that, especially, I mean, it's been a while since the movie. I can't even remember.
It's been 6 years, yeah. 6
years. I think that's something that the fact that the movie's still popular and still going, I think that also has a lot to say about people and their friend groups and realizing like, oh, that could be me and my friends. Like, we do fun stuff like that. I think that's another way it connects with people.
Yeah. Yeah, it's been very strange. It's taken a while to come to terms with the existence of a movie about myself.
You're doing
Which,
all right.
you know, it's not. Like, I mean, I think you see the characters more as people in our lives than I did at the time. Maybe it was subconscious, or some of it was very like this Stacy is like based on my sister, like very, very much so, and like Anna Kendrick did a really good job being my sister. It was very strange, and she was wearing my sister's actual name tag in the movie, because my sister worked at the Second Cup.
Yeah.
It's because that's what makes it so weird. That's what made it so weird for the Toronto premiere was like a very strange time, a strange night.
Yeah.
It was, but yeah, over the years, like I've come to terms with it, and other people love it so much that makes it better.
It does, and it was weird, and when the movie didn't catch on, 'cause it's like, oh, maybe we're all not that cool. But I think that there were other issues at play.
And watching it, I realize I've been trying to think like, what are my obsessions? Like, what do I always come back to?
Yeah.
And like being cool is probably number one. And I was like, I'll never be cool. But then I look at it, I'm like, people think I'm cool.
Yeah.
So does that make me cool? Or do I have to feel cool?
It did until you started talking about it right now.
Now they don't think I'm cool anymore.
It worked. That's great. I could probably take. Actually, I'm not even looking at the time. Oh, we got time.
We have some time.
Yeah. Does anyone have? I guess we got back to Scott Pilgrim. Sorry. I'm gonna ask somebody different. I'm sorry, but I'll come back. Go ahead.
Yeah. I was wondering about the sort of like researching for the food bits of Seconds. Just in like a lot of interesting stuff in there.
Yeah. I mean, honestly, with Seconds, I started working with my assistant, Jason Fisher. So a lot of the food ended up being his contribution. The big food scene when she cooks the rabbit stew or whatever it is, that was contributed by a friend of mine who's like an amateur chef who's like... he came over and hacked up some rabbits in front of me. It was very strange. But it was good. It was a good experience, and that just went into the book. I took a bunch of pictures and drew a bunch of it into the book. But then Jason would just start drawing crazy stuff in the background a lot, especially and later in the book when they start getting further afield, like into other dimensions. Like he drew. I think he drew Scott Pilgrim eating a giant avocado at one point. Like it's like this big, and just there's a lot of. Or he drew like. The octopus from Final Fantasy, Ultros. Yeah. Someone's eating like that octopus. He drew a lot of weird stuff, which is why I love working with him. We're working together on the next book too.
Actually, that's an interesting thing because you had. I had really thought you were going to be a lone wolf forever too. You get people like that were kind of your like cartooning heroes, and the Japanese guys and ladies, all had assistants, but the American guys like Klaus and stuff like that. You were just like. Yeah, like I'm gonna go it alone and be my own guy, and
Well, that was
especially
like-
Hopeless Savages. I mean, was not a fun. That collaborative experience was not a fun one for you. I was really surprised when you both took on assistants and agreed to work with Leslie on Snot Girl.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, it was a tough experience, Hopeless Savages, you know, and I was banging my head against the wall a lot, but working with someone else's script also helps me to see what I want to draw, what I don't want to draw.
Mm-hmm.
But I was very faithful to her script as much as I could be, which
Which is also why it's so long.
yeah, sometimes it was like, there's 9 characters in this panel and in every other panel on the page, and I would just draw them all, which is not what you want to do in comics. Like, and I don't think she meant for me to do that. It was just kind of, I just took it very literally. But yeah, no, I was always really obsessed with like the Japanese model of doing comics, which was both the magazine format and the assistant model. So that's something I always wanted to do. And then with Scott Pilgrim Volume 6, I got to do it because I was on such a deadline, because I wanted to get the book out before the movie came out, because the book was a little tiny black and white book, and I didn't think people would like it after they saw a $60 million movie of the same thing.
Yeah.
So I wanted to get it out a few weeks before, and I took on 2 assistants. One at first, and then the second one later on to help me draw the crowd scenes towards the end. And my first assistant, John Kantz, like he's a little older than me. He's just like, he can draw anything and make it look beautiful, and he draws in this like really kind of like 80s manga style, which I worship, like Masamune Shiro kind of style. But he can also just draw anything. So he would come in and like he made up like the like cryogenic machine that I wanted. Like I drew like a really rough version of it, and he just like added all this detail to it and made it super cool. And he was just an expert at stuff like that. But that also ended up making the 6th book feel a little jarring, because there's so much more detail in some of the scenes.
Mm-hmm.
And then the other assistant, I found him drawing. I'm sure I've said this in interviews before, but I found my other assistant, Aaron, drawing porn of Scott Pilgrim on like a forum somewhere, and I was like, this is really well done. Can you draw like 50 more of these people and put them in the background with clothes on? So that's basically how that happened. And we got it done in time, so that's a good job. And then with Seconds, I knew I wanted someone because I wanted it to have more of a lush feeling, more detailed, and it has that fairy tale feeling. And then Jason Fisher, who I'd known for years, someone just recommended him, and I was like, oh yeah, that's perfect. He draws this sort of rough-hewn kind of fairy tale-ish stuff, and he's really great at monsters, and he's really great at food. He's known for his luscious hamburger drawings. So yeah, it was a great fit, and then we got along so well. You know, he ended up basically living in my house for 5 or 6 weeks towards the end, and we were
just to power through the end of the series,
Yeah.
the end of the book.
Yeah, and we did. I think we inked 200 pages in that time.
Oh my god!
And we don't know when we did it. The pile just kind of. The pile was like this, and we were like, oh my god, when are we going to finish it? And then the pile was like this, like before we knew it. It was really magical.
Oh, that's great.
Horrible.
So that leads us to Snot Girl, and how long was that developing? It sort of seemed like you were working
with Leslie during my Seconds tour. So that was about 2 summers ago.
Okay.
I was going all over the place. I came here and I went up the west coast of America. I went across Canada, and yeah, I was just I'd known Leslie for about 4 or 5 years, and I love her drawings. For a while I was like really trying to force all my friends to draw more comics.
Yeah.
And I was like, Leslie, you should be drawing basically I was like, you should be drawing like a monthly comic of some kind. Like, do you want me to help you with something? And then it evolved into this whole thing. But yeah, we came up with the whole thing together. We came up with all the characters, and we're in love with all our characters, even though they're, sometimes they're extremely unlikable. They make, like, when I walk outside the store, like, Snot Girl makes no sense to me. Like, I'm in a completely different part of the world. This is more like Canada, but when I'm in Southern California, Snot Girl makes a lot of sense to me.
It is of a place.
it's
For
of a
sure.
place, it's of a time. So we'll see how the culture goes. We'll see if this is the beginning of this or if this is just a blip in terms of like the I don't know, the social media. Like, and social media has been such a big part of my life. For like, I've been on Twitter since what, 2008, I think.
Yeah.
It's like that's a long time now. It's going to be 10 years soon, which is stupid. But yeah, so obviously I've seen a lot of social media. I've seen a lot of the dark side of that, and I've you know, and being minorly famous, I'm familiar with that. So it's been really fun to kind of write this character who's just
Who lives there?
who doesn't deal with it well.
Yeah.
Well, I deal with it relatively well on the outside.
Yeah. So you're doing this in issues from Image Comics, coming out roughly every 6 weeks or so, give or take, and it'll be collected into book format. I mean, we talked a little bit about this. You're writing, trying to make the issues really compelling, but were you worried that everything that you've been doing up to that point has been, you know, a nice spined book, and now you've got this issues? Were you worried about your audience coming over and trying that format?
Yeah. Oh yeah. First of all, where do they buy it? Most people don't know where to buy comics.
Like, there's not a comic
It's
book
at a
store in this
comic
town,
shop.
even though there's a
Yeah.
comics festival in this town.
Yeah, exactly. It's very tough to get comics sometimes.
Yeah.
It's not as easy as getting books these days. You can generally get a book anywhere. I lost my train of thought.
Well, how's it going in issues? How are you enjoying
issues,
the format?
It's tough. It's way harder than I thought it would be. And yeah, I was very stressed about, or I still am stressed. Literally, we've got 3 issues out, and people are making their mind up about it.
Uh-huh.
But then I look back at Scott Pilgrim, I'm like, he doesn't even really meet Ramona until page 80, which we haven't made it to 80 pages yet. So that's challenging because I'm used to that format. I'm used to having more breathing space and being able to kind of introduce things in a slower way. And I'm doing that to some degree in Snot Girl, but it's harder to tell because you're just reading this little small bit. So at the same time, I'm trying to make it extremely cliffhangery and fun, but also it has very little plot, so people don't know what to make of it.
Did you want to take one more question from the audience in the time we got left? Yeah, sure, go ahead.
Do you ever struggle with long deadlines and when you have to make a lot of pages? And if you do, how do you get over that so you can?
I am late. No, it's been terrible, especially this new book. I had to push it back a year because I just haven't gotten as far as I want to. Because it's hard to know what your personal milestones are when you're working on something of that size. I have to write it, I have to draw it, I have to get all these pages done at some point. I have to know it's also going to be a series, so I have to kind of know what's going to happen in the rest of the series to some degree. So that's tough. So and conversely, doing Snot Girl, the deadlines are very close. They're very manageable, and hustling to make those deadlines is a lot easier than having to think long term about some giant project. So it's been a real kind of battle lately, just to remember to look at the long deadlines and actually get work done, and not just focus on putting out fires that day. And like I said, I think almost every Scott Pilgrim book was late. I think, I don't know if this is true, but I remember reading that Scott Pilgrim 5 was the only one that was on time, and then that's why it wasn't as good. That's what someone said. That's what I've been told. Yeah, I think 5 and 6 were on time. 6 was on time because it had to be.
Yeah.
4 was, I know Volume 2 was probably the latest. Volume 2 and 3 are fairly late, but no one cares now.
Alan Moore said that Watchmen, the last issue of Watchmen, took something like 9 months to come out after number 11.
Literally no one remembers or cares.
Yeah, well,
someone will remember and will care.
Those of us bringing it up on stage at comic book festivals remember, and now you all know too. Yeah.
Yeah, and Seconds was, Seconds was delayed because of my injury, but I don't know. I don't have a good strategy for that. It's just at some point you just start working. I always start working right before the deadline. It's a good time to start. That's how I always was in school. And
me too.
That's how I still am. So it's terrible. I've never been very steady. I'll have a great day where I do a ton of work, and then I'll have 6 days where I do no work. So I could have done a regular amount of work for 7 days instead of just doing all my work on one of those days.
And come out ahead.
Yeah, that would have been great. I'd probably be a much happier person.
On that fun note, did you have any last? We've got to wrap up. Did you have any last final thoughts you wanted to share with the audience, or?
I don't know. I've been having fun at the festival. Is everyone having a good time at the festival?
Woo!
Yeah. I'm looking forward to getting home and drawing more pictures because I'm more comfortable when I'm in a small room instead of in a big room surrounded by people.
Yeah.
But other than that, I'm having a great time, and this has been fun to talk to you about this.
Oh, that's awesome. Thanks so much. Everybody, thanks so much for coming. Thank you, Bryan Lee O'Malley, for coming.
Thank you.
So Bryan is going to be going upstairs and outside to the playgroup room, to the Forbidden Planet pop-up shop to do a signing right now.